Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kristen Soward's also known as Seventh Mastery.
And today, Kristen, I think that the topic and what we're doing are kind of intertwined irrestrictably right now. That's
That's
not
fair.
a real word.
I like it.
Yeah. So,
Creative license.
so before I jump into what I've been doing,
hmm
what have you been doing? Maybe we will
Well,
tie together.
maybe. I have been working on a micro setting that I'm running for children. But of course, I
What?
do everything like way too much
Mm-hmm.
because I'm me. And so, even though it's a one shot that I'm running for my friend's kid and her friends from school, I've made it into a little campaign setting already. And I've been working on their minis. Yeah, it's Shatterwing Vale. It's very I don't want to say Dragonlance inspired because it's not. It's like if Dragonlance and Planescape had a baby, that would be this campaign setting.
Oh.
But it's mostly because the kids wanted to play Tieflings and Dragonborn, and that's all they want to play. It's Tieflings and Dragonborn. And so I've been having a fun time going through and finding tons and tons of minis for that, and making making kid friendly adventure. I guess I was given
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more leeway than I expected because I thought I was going to have to like really kind of go like puppies and polka dots. But it feels like I'm gonna get away with a little a little bit more. So I have sadness monsters that I've got, and then there's gonna be like zombies, but they're just gonna be like there's a set from Mammoth Factory called The Blind, I think, that just came out, and they have like they kind of remind me of Grimlocks, and
Oh yeah, we
they're
looked at them last episode.
yeah they're gonna be my zombies, my sad zombie people, and I'm gonna have a mechanic where if the kids can make their character feel happy, one monster will see them, but the other monster won't. If they can make themselves feel sad, the other monsters will see them because the monsters feed on different emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be fun. But I've got like way too involved with it, like
Mm-hmm.
way too involved.
Yeah. So like immediately concerns and questions come to mind. Like
Sure.
playing with kids has to be absolutely chaotic.
It can be, but
Mhm.
like kids like combat, kids like
Right.
board game violence. Turn order is a problem
Mm-hmm.
when you're dungeon mastering for children for sure.
Uh-huh.
And so it's very much you got to incentivize like you know staying in your lane and your action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll probably try to have a very visual initiative going on.
Right.
Like maybe the I like the one on the DM screen where you do the little cards that are hanging off.
Ah, yes. Table tents.
Yeah, we'll probably do something like that. I might even, if I can get the minis to a decent standard, I might take pictures of them and just kind of use like cut out little pictures of their minis or something. I don't know.
Like if you go through, if they're using Hero Forge minis, they have like the little Hero Forge base that makes it into a table tent, so you can print a board version and a DM screen version.
I think that's super cool, but I did not use Hero Forge. I went through and picked a bunch of minis. I've actually made the characters too, so
Mm.
I've had a time making a bunch of third level characters for these kids, but I think they'll be cool.
Huh. I'm tempted now to go on Hero Forge and just make a bunch of bases with that base option on it and then put no minis on it and then download that as an STL.
Yeah, you could, I guess, right? And
Yeah.
just and use that. But I bet that's like if we looked, it would be on Culture Thingiverse probably too.
Almost certainly.
Almost
Yes,
certainly.
this makes more sense. This makes absolutely more sense. Oh, so the other thing is like, and you're probably not running into this problem, but the last time I ran for kids was at a Gen Con event
Mm,
where I was geoming a special table for Paizo,
okay.
uh, and and then but because of that, it's a set adventure that Paizo has provided for me,
hmm
and this was before the big changeover in Pathfinder Society when there were still faction missions in some of the older material.
Right.
I don't think they counted as much, but they were still there. And House Throne, the things happen. Let's just say I had to very quickly, because I had a table full of like 8 to 13-year-olds and one parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, the parent knew about Pathfinder, and I had to be like, this got some Dark Archive stuff in it. And this room has got weird jungle gym equipment with rips and chains. And we're going to gloss over this and move on
And they
very
had you run that
quickly.
scenario for kids?
The kid, I was a scheduled slot. The kids were not part of the equation until I show up for my scheduled slot
Oh,
to a
okay.
table full of kids.
Gotcha. It was incidental kids, not planned
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. Like,
Big difference.
eventually, like Pathfinder Society started having actual children events and stuff like that, and
Right, right.
also BDSM stuff eventually stopped being as common in Pathfinder adventures.
Yeah, every once in a while I go back and read was it
Mhm.
Shackled City?
Oh boy.
Because that was an early Paizo product that was it was
Hmm.
Dungeon Dragon conversion.
Yes.
Woof. That is not after school special
No,
material.
no, no. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that's to believe because in the early Pathfinder days, especially, a lot of those crew had been working for, Wizards of the Coast or D&D adjacent stuff, and that was back when Wizards had really, really strict content policies in some of the most not good ways. I mean, that was back when Wizards of the Coast still had an LGBT ban on content. You weren't even
Hmm.
allowed to include it.
Right.
Some famously, some designers have snuck it in over the years, but then at Paizo they're just like, content policy doesn't exist. Let's do adventures for grown-ups, and that's how you end up with most of the stuff Nick Logue ever wrote, and
Hmm. I've done
the
workshop with Nick.
ogres,
It was fun.
and yeah, and some of the adult content was introduced, and also that also led to like a lot of more representation appearing into a lot of Pathfinder stuff, and a lot of really good things came from that. But that's definitely in the early days. There was a whole lot of,
Hmm.
getting out of the parents' house and finally hitting college and having the freedom to do all the things you weren't ever allowed to do. And Alex Shivler is talking about Mammy Grawl, and let's not talk about Mammy Grawl and that really interesting thing in her closet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even some of the names like Skin Saw Massacres, right? Like,
Yep.
yikes,
Since, yep.
yikes.
Oh, so that was fun, and that was the last time I really ran for a group of kids, and it was a whole lot of me very quickly censoring and rewriting content and on the fly, because that adventure was, it was not just background dressing; it was part of the story.
Well, also like the idea of Dark Archive, because that's more when I played PFS, and you got missions sometimes to like sort of DL betray your party too, like to get
Yeah.
stuff and let like bad guys go, and like yeah, yikes, that would have been also
Yeah, I'm glad
problematic.
those missions just don't exist anymore because it was, and I think they were still called Cheliacs back then, not even Dark Archive. It was
Gotcha.
just the
Yeah.
Cheliacs missions when they
Right.
were just the five major nations of the inner sea setting.
Sure.
Oh, fun times. So, are you doing any 3D printing for this kid game?
So I've got the monsters. I already did these tentacly things. I think I might have showed you last week. I don't
Oh,
remember.
yes, yes. The. So, I have a question.
Yes.
With your style of games, why
Yes.
did they let you do this for kids?
Because I offered to pro DM for free.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah. Yeah, but that's the scariest thing, and I think
Hmm.
it's scary, and it's got the tentacles, but it's not like explicitly horrible,
Right.
and it's going to be sadness zombies, sadness eating monster, and dragon, because Dungeons and Dragons got to have a dragon, right? But
Right. Of course.
um,
Dragons required.
yeah, currently I'm probably going to use a stock dragon because my friend was visiting and dropped one of my other dragons that I was considering using, and it's in little pieces now. So
Hmm.
kids on tentacles. That's a whole different genre, Alex.
So we
Yeah.
have P&D Mike in the chat as well as Square Peg. We've already said hi to Alex and James. Hello, everybody. If you've got any questions for us, please go ahead and get them in on the chat so that we can answer them throughout the show. Any other cool 3D prints going? Did you do like a terrain setup or anything like that?
I'm just doing some set dressing to make the dungeon tiles I'm using more dragony. Um,
Okay.
but then I did the bad thing and popped my FEP. So Fortunately,
Ooh.
I sensed a disturbance in the resin.
Oh
and,
dear.
and I had done a flash clean, so the whole bottom had cured.
Right.
And I was taking the plate off to peel that out because I'd done the trick where you leave an old support in there so it fuses
Right.
into it, so you can peel it off really easily.
Super easy cleaning trick everybody should know about.
Yes, absolutely. And there was a little pop when I pulled it off, and I thought that's an odd sound. And I went and I kind of felt in the bottom. I'm like, oh, there's a dent here. And I felt on my screen protector, and I was like, oh, there is a spike. And I was like, that was a perforated FEP that I just happened to catch and cure in that moment. Because had I even just pulled that off, I bet you that would have been still a ripped
drip,
like
drip, drip,
yeah,
drip.
that would have been a mess. And it fortunately
have to replace that screen protector.
Yeah, I actually got the little pop of resin right off the screen protector came off of it. So I'm just going to make sure that it's got no residue and it's probably good to stay.
But yeah, this going back to the motto, everybody use a screen protector.
Seriously,
this is how you save your resin printers.
Yeah.
And also, y'all, don't worry about the screen. People worry about like, I don't want any fingerprints on the screen. I don't want any smudges on the glass. I don't want any bubbles in between the screen protector and thing. Don't worry about that at all, y'all.
As long as light gets through it.
Yeah, you're just needing light. Is like the imperceptible distortions that your fingerprint or it doesn't matter if it looks like a bowl of popcorn on the top of that screen protector. There's so many bubbles. It is fine, y'all, and you will get crisp, perfect prints off of that. That screen is going to smush that down when it gets ready to print, and that resin is going to get hit with that light, and everything's going to be wonderful. You don't need to worry about the bubbles. You don't need to worry about the fingerprints. Just make sure you don't get resin. And in this case, the cleaning the screen protector and able to get it off is the reason that you can't do that with a lot of printers is the layer that you touch has got a UV layer or a shift or a polarizer. Sorry.
For those who haven't heard, I did this to my brand new Anycubic Mono X back in the day and ruined it like within a month of getting it.
Yeah. So often there's like a polarization layer that's like really important for the printer to work, and it's just exposed straight to the surface.
Exactly.
So when you go to clean, you scrape that and then
scrape it right off.
Worthless screen.
Yep. You have to replace the whole LCD.
$1 screen protector and you good. Forever.
And you don't have to I do get the fancy ones myself, but you don't have to. You can just use almost any, plastic
I'm still using
protector.
Like tablet screen protectors, really cheap $5 for $10 tablet screen protectors. And honestly, I'm still on my second one of those, so I still got 3 more in the box that I've not even touched.
I think I still have 1 or 2 from my first pack, but I did have to replace it once or twice because I did have a FEP pop that was a mess.
When it gets to be a mess, it's not even that you can't clean it off and save it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's just throw down the paper towels, throw away the screen protector, throw on a new one. It's just the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just the best way to
and I actually recommend, like, if you can get your mess under control, still just cure your screen protector with it on it so that you don't have to worry about it getting on your glass.
Absolutely.
But so that was what halted me in my next project because I'm sure you saw Dragon Trappers dropped their big Fey thing, and
with lots of trees, and you showed me some really cool freaking plant wolves,
and they're really rad, and I'm not sure what they're going to be in OPR, but I'll figure it out. However, I also got Whispering Woods delivered their Kickstarter for Monolith, so I just got inundated with that, the Monster Mayhem set that C. Catlett mentioned last week. I have all sorts of woody Sylvanethish people, and it is time for that army, I think, to get printed. Also, because I'm really kind of getting tired of printing dark tentacly stuff. Not that I love my dark tentacly stuff, don't get me wrong, but like after doing so much of my Plague army, I would like to use a bright palette, please. Like, I have to admit, making those minis for the kids, I used like more of those like bubblegum pink glazes and things, just trying to like get some bright color into something I was working on. Cause I feel like I've been in the dark, cold, slimy recesses of color for a while. And it's the season. I think it's wearing on me. But
this is why I've like always enjoyed embracing bright colors. Like my human army is teal and yellow,
Mm-hmm.
and like my high elves are like white armor and silver and gold, which is not super colorful, but it's very bright. In fact, I
Right.
had to tone it down because like their accent color. There's a common thing I do when I paint armies is like I'll go with a lot of neutrals and then just one really strong accent color. But for the high elves, the accent color is just like super dark blue, like Prussian blue.
Right.
And then on like my undead, they're bright green and purples, and I
Yeah, I
love
actually
them.
really like your color palette on your undead with the misty underlight.
Yeah.
So do we know the artist on this?
So this is Art of Sedana, and they are awesome. They did the Flamecraft board game, and they've got lots of arts of like really cute, like town dragons helping people out, and like very cute fantasy. They're one of my favorite artists, and they just launched They just put this post up of some flower wolves and cubs. So these are wolves, and I love everything Sedona does. And after I shared this, you immediately hit my comments that we have some very pretty plant wolves
Yep.
from the Fey Petal Court. This is from Dragon Trapper's Lodge. So it's these wolves, but they're made out of plants with like big plant tails and flower petals and all sorts of awesomeness. And they look really great. I love it. We have Shannon in chat. Love this art. Yeah, Art of Sedona. You need to check it out. They also did the Flamecraft board game, which is an awesome worker placement about a town that has little helper dragons that help them do all the cool stuff. Yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah, I like those wolves enough. I'll actually use cavalry bases probably for them because I think they did a good job on them. But like I don't know if I've talked about this. I detest cavalry bases with a fiery
And
passion.
is this one of their OPR compatibles?
I think that they're going to be doing it. I hope they do an army set with it because otherwise I'm going to have to figure out that. Also, by the way, like I can't believe the Wood Elves don't get a second level wizard because that's what you had me look at, and I was like, they have
Oh,
one wizard add-on for one leader. That was it. It's like what?
that's pretty common in OPRA fantasy. Like there was a like all the wizards got scaled way back in that game in the 250 beta.
That makes me sad because one of the things I liked is there was a whole bunch of troops you could give wizard 1 to, and I was going to make an all spellcaster army, and now I can't. I bet.
You're limited to 3 spellcasters in any given army.
No, why? Okay.
Because this is the max amount of heroes you're allowed to have in any given army. Well, at 2,000 points. If you go for higher points, you get more.
All right.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, so that was me hitting a roadblock where I had to realize that I should just focus on some painting the rest of the week because I'm going to have to do FEPs and I have 3 to replace because I've been lazy. So I'm going to have an FEP party before I can continue my planty army.
It is OPR compatible, so they are going to distribute army stats for this.
Yeah. I figured it was. And they've been talking about it.
All right, so moving. Sorry for the distraction. There.
It's okay. Speaking of distractions, Alex did just mention that Fat Dragon Games is having a 90% off offer with their newest Kickstarter. I did not get that email.
Alex, if you could send me an IM with that info on it, that'd be great.
Ditto.
I knew that they were doing a big discount soon, and their new set is got dungeons that have low walls. So if the Fat Dragon Games is one of the oldest companies that's been involved in the 3D printing space, and I was going to bring them up for a different reason for today's topic, actually. So I'll please loop back to them. And fair disclosure, they're one of the first industry jobs I've had in the game industry. Is I used to do work for Fat Dragon Games to help with their cut files for their 2D printable terrain that you had to origami cardstock together. And so for those, and because you have to like cut them out carefully with a knife, lots of people would go out and buy the silhouette cutters. Like what's the other big brand called? Like the
Cricut.
The Crickets. Yeah. So it's just a little robot that will cut paper into complex shapes. Well,
there might be a Cricut
dungeon
in this house.
tiles. You can get their dungeon tile files and have the little robot do all the complex cutting for you, and then just pull it off and glue it together. And I was the guy who made the robot dance for them.
Cute.
Yeah. And but yeah, their new set is going to have like a whole bunch of dungeon tiles and some, and they're finally, and like not finally, they had low wall add-ons for ages and ages with their old sets, but like they're showing off a bunch of it with low walls, which is becoming my favorite way
Yep.
to do
I'm
walls.
I'm getting very on board with that. The low
Mhm.
walls with the implied walls, like
Yeah,
the ones that Kraken did,
yeah,
and Cast and Play was starting to do, but they appear to be not doing walls
yeah. Cast and
anymore.
Play is not doing terrain anymore as part of their release sets, which I am very sad about because they honestly, the terrain was sometimes the biggest reason I was supporting them
It's
because they
true.
had
It's
such
true.
awesome terrain
And
with each of their sets. On the flip side, what they have started doing instead is releasing all their models into a bazillion poses, which
mm,
is so. Here's something interesting about Cast and Play is they don't do the armature rigs for their models. They sculpt in those poses. So even if it's the same figure in multiple poses, they did that from scratch.
hmm, yikes,
So it's
that's a
an
lot of time.
incredibly you get a superior result when you do it that way because you're able to like custom sculpt how everything reacts to the bends and folds of the skin and flesh
Right.
and clothing, and you're not having to like deal with the distortions of the armature, but it's like a million times more work to do it
Yeah.
that way. And you can, in a lot of in the armature way, you can then just sculpt over the armature to like fix those things yourself. So like there's a lot of people that prefer to go that method where you do use the armature to repose it and then you just go in and then you like manually fix the pose to get everything going. And I'm on a weird tangent right now, but
It's okay. I'm going to add to it.
mhm,
Speaking of Cast and Play,
mhm.
and their we'll say premium companions frontier situation, they did also drop the stretch goals. So if you've been waiting whether or not you were going to commit the sizable investment, is what I will call it, to that companions thing, you might get more for the value than you thought
Mm,
because the stretch goals have dropped, so that
right.
more of them will unlock.
Right. I really like the companions, but I'm still kind of on the fence because it's $100 buy-in,
Yep,
and
yep,
it's a lot of models. It's a lot of models. But I
yep.
don't know that I need $100 worth of really cool looking pets. But if this is what you're going for, it's probably the best option out there for adventure
I
animals.
would say if you're doing like a Kingdom of Monsters or one
Mm-hmm.
of the other Poke clones, it would be
Mm-hmm.
great.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say right now I'll pay premium price for a $5 Sharpay when I need it versus
Right. That might
buying.
be where I go with this.
Yeah, and so I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that, and it's almost
Mm-hmm.
over, so hence why they dropped the goals. But
Yeah.
if you've been sitting on the fence, that might be a reason to
Mm-hmm.
kick it over.
Yeah, at $100, if you go by my usual metric, where for a month I need to pick two models before I feel that it's worth the investment, I would need to have 20 models from this that are out of
Right,
print. Yeah,
right. Which I just don't know
and
that
for a lot
they're
of the campaigns, that's obvious. Like their building campaigns and their terrain campaign, that was just such an obvious buy-in because so many great stuff out of those sets. Um, and for this one, if you're running that kind of campaign, this is the way to go. Dungeon
yeah.
if you're doing your dungeons and doggos or uh,
I mean, it is a lack. It's one of the
mhm,
reasons why I
yeah,
think Dungeons and Lasers did a similar thing for one of their first like
right.
incentives was a big thing of pets. But I have that now, so I don't need
Hmm.
as many.
Yeah. So
So
I have been. So the topic of this episode is, I guess what I put, cutting your 3D printing losses, and I have had to do a big acceptance that a project of mine was not going according to plan. And a
mhm.
lot of that was I need to be careful here because I have had a very bad, unfulfilling experience with Soraya Tech ABS like fast navy gray. And I know a lot of people love Soraya Tech ABS like fast. It's a lot of people's favorite resin. And the navy gray, when it does print, it prints a gorgeous dark gray mini with sharp details that you can see all those lovely details on. These these strikers from Puppets War were printed in it, and
Yep.
here you can see the color on the base. It's a gorgeous color. I get why people
Yep.
like this.
Especially like in
The
sci-fi,
Sarat,
it vibes
yeah.
well for me. Anyway, go on.
Well, of course, I'm going to paint all my stuff, so I don't actually
I
care
know
what the
you
color the
are,
resin
but
is. But it shows up
illustrated
great
by
on prints.
your other choice, but we'll talk about that in a second, I think.
Yeah. So I had to, but the resins, the Ceratic ABS like is a lot more brittle than other brands ABS likes.
Mm-hmm.
And so much so that I don't think it really deserves the label. Though it's definitely a lot more stable than their normal. Their normal stuff is like absolutely super crisp details,
Yeah,
amazing
but
crisp
it's
details. Then you
brittle.
breathe on it wrong and it shatters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was going to, so I was doing my at 10% tenacious ad, and it was still way too brittle. And so I was printing off, the rat army for my OPR rat army, and I was just having break after break after break, and like their ears were getting broken even when I was getting them off the supports,
Huh.
and the halberds would snap because spears and long poles is like the thing in models that will break if anything does.
Yep.
Like there's a reason that in the hobby, a lot of people for their spearmen will break off the spears on purpose and then use copper rods to replace them and
Mm-hmm.
then paint them as if they're wood. So I was like, this is it. I've got like over 1,000 points worth of Ratman, and it's all printed in this stuff, and I'm gonna have a headache with the basing because I love my basing technique, but it is an involved process in getting these up. I need to. I'm having a time crunch right now. I have to get some armies ready for an event that I'll be going to in June,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to get these things done fast. And I'm just super frustrated with the breakage, the brittleness, and everything just slowing it down. And I was like, wait a minute, these cost nothing. These cost nothing.
Don't do it. You're gonna do it, aren't you?
Huh?
I thought you were gonna illustrate it by like throwing one or something.
No. So I have my garbage can here because it is filled with my rats. They're all gone. They're all gone.
It still makes me sad. Like I like. There's this little part of me. There's like there are gamers, Param, who need rat minis somewhere in this world. You should at least say, hey, send me postage.
And I'm going to show you how brittle this is. So this is a sword. This is a long sword. This is already a broken mini. This was a casualty before it started.
Okay.
So this long sword should be nice, and it's nice and thick. It's a good thick blade. That's like a millimeter thick blade. Like this isn't the thing that's supposed to break. And with 10% tenacious, I should be able to bounce this off concrete. But like there's no flex. Oh, and it broke even before I intended to put pressure on it. I didn't even put the pressure I was about to put on it to break it on purpose. It just snapped off that easy.
I think I've mentioned that I had some problems similar when I was doing the 10% tenacious with the Rich Opto cheap stuff I was using, and I think I thought that it was because I was vibration cleaning them and it was causing some microfracturing or something. But wow, it's just crumbling apart. So if you're gonna keep doing it, stop. It hurts.
What?
No,
they're already broken. That's why I'm doing it. They're
not all broken.
Easy.
They're not all broken. I know it. Anyway,
so I've reprinted the army. So I threw it out and reprinted the army. And look at this one. I can just wiggle that pole arm back and forth as much as I want, and it's not gonna break. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I was just mostly being, triggered about all the broken minis. But it's fine. I was just saying that I wonder sometimes if the Tenacious ad is worth it. But then you just illustrated your favorite minty boys being quite flexible.
Yeah, I would have to add a lot more Tenacious than I was. And Tenacious, the price of Tenacious has gone down, but it's still an expensive resin. It's like $60 for a kilogram right now. And that's even if I would only get 5 uses out of that. That would add to the total cost of the resin quite a bit. And the other part about navy gray we mentioned is it separates it. So I was constantly having like white streaks through the
Yep.
models, which
This
if
I
I'm going to
have
paint them is
experienced.
nothing because, but then again, why am I using this really cool trendy navy gray if I don't even get the navy gray part of it?
I don't know.
So I realized that, because we've talked about this a little bit before, but being in this hobby, especially with some of the abusive prices that have existed in this hobby, you still have a thought that like a miniature figure has value, that an unpainted miniature figure that you printed, you still in your brain you put a price tag or a value on it because we've been trained all our gamer lives to think of these little precious pewter babies that were so hard to acquire and so expensive.
Or plastic babies that cost more than the pewter ever did. Go on.
I know. I mean, I'm not even taking jabs at GW here, but just the normal cost of minis at reasonable prices was still an expensive investment for anything of quality. But that's just not true anymore with the 3D print. So I was just like, listen, I could paint this up. If I painted it up, that's when it has value because it took my time away from me.
Right.
Whereas I was just like, fine, I'm just going to reprint it. I'm just going to reprint what I did, and I got to have some fun with some tape, with some build plate Tetris with it. And so here's a tray full of them. And so I made two changes with the
Mm-hmm.
with the new minis. First
Okay.
change was going back to my minty green Elegoo ABS like is gold. You almost don't need tenacious with it, but with 10% tenacious, this stuff is indestructible. Well, not indestructible, but I can bounce it off concrete. Like
Sure.
literally, I can bounce it off concrete, and the mini is fine. I might break this halberd if I bounced it on concrete, but like I bounced an orc off concrete, literally, no
Mm.
damage to the orc.
Second change.
Second change was I went to pre-printed bases so that I could pound these out faster by just throwing some contrast paint on the base and be done with it as far as
Right.
basing and getting them ready. So I very carefully first I reprinted all this. I threw away all the old minis just right in the trash. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's something of value in those minis because I'm low on magnets.
Ah,
So I went back and got them out, broke them off their bases, snapping them at the ankles, each one to get the base clear. Got my little pokey needle from Reaper, my little paint clear pokey needle, and poked out those magnets from the bases because they were only pressure fitted into those really cool MDF bases, which I salvaged my MDF bases as well, so they'll get reused when I do have an army that I want to put them back on my MDF bases. And these are the
gotcha.
ones that you still have magnets in them. I didn't need to get all my magnets back.
So did you put magnet holes in your in
So
your
these bases have the 2 millimeter recess, which
I
is
already
the
have it.
exact thickness of my magnets. So I
Okay.
didn't need to do holes.
Gotcha.
I would have I do put magnet holes in bases that don't have them, though I have switched to just the magnet stickers for those bases now with flat bottoms.
Right.
And just an example here, we're going back to the price comparison. This is 15 rats with 15 resin bases. Those bases use up almost as much as the rats. I could get 30 rats on this plate for the
Probably,
same.
yeah. Yeah.
It's using 111 milliliters of resin. This print plate is going to cost me $4.46 for all 15 rats. And at that price point, I don't have to care. I don't have to worry about it. Until I put paint on it, it was nothing. But you know what I did do? I put
What's
some
that?
paint on some rats before this happened. So I had to very carefully get my little hobby knife out and go down at the feet and cut those rats very gently off those MDF bases, which ended up being surprisingly easy to do.
So wait, you kept some of your bad resins that you had painted.
Yeah, because they've been painted, that means they have some value.
Okay. All
They
right.
took my time. So these are the bad resin. Good resin bases, bad resin rats, but because they were already painted, they get to live because this is where I actually put time
That'll
into.
be
So
your
these will stay.
veterans. They can speak of the old days when things were harder and the resin cracked up and down hills.
And nice magnets. So
Nice.
This is one of my old Kings of War magnet trays, but even though when I'm even for minis I'm not going to use in Kings of War, this is like my little staging base. So
Sure.
like I just throw the magnets onto the base, then I put a glue drop on each of the magnets, then I put the base down on top of the glue drop, and then wait a little bit, pull the base off now that it's got
Hmm.
magnets glued permanently to it.
And
I
that
would
gets
have
them
done
lined up
this,
right too.
yeah, and then when I if I had to do this special because these were already painted, so then I had to paint the bases, then glue the rats onto the painted bases. But if these were, I would do not normally paint my bases separate. I would have for the rest of the rats, they're going to get glued to the bases and the magnets at the same time. That'll just be
Gotcha.
like just line up all the rats on this little tray, and then glue them down. Then we'll take them outside, spray prime the crap out of them, bring them inside, paint the rats. So reprinted my entire rat army. All 1,000 points is going to cost me $15 worth of resin.
So
And
wait,
I have a whole bunch of rat bits in the trash.
sure. What I mean, other than your rank and file troops, what else fits in that 1,000 points? I'm curious. Do you get into the big ogre guys or?
No, that was just a whole lot of troops.
Okay.
I will have, like in my final rat list, I very much intend to have the snipers because I like the snipers. I want to get one of the big war machines in there, probably the cannon, because Go Boom is nice. And I want to get some rat assassins in there, and of course, the battle captain on the big giant fox is going to join my ratman army.
Cool.
Now, next, I don't know if I want to go all the way to the ferret because the ferret is really nice.
Rat cemetery. Is that?
Oh gosh, yeah, but yeah, it's weird because looking in this little trash can and seeing, you know, a whole bunch of probably what would have been $150, $200 worth of GW plastic if it was GW plastic,
Right.
just sitting in the trash can. And even then, like I've talked about having to throw away old prints before, but at least those were defective prints. This is the first time I've taken a project on the shelf that I've been absolutely like engaged with, and went nah,
Yeah.
trash,
Yeah.
reprint.
Well, it's like when you get a warped print, you know, like
It's not worth salvaging. It's not. I was just like that when I was first getting started. I'd have a bad print, and I was like, I just a little bit of putty. I know how to do this because I've had to do it with models I paid my hard-earned cash for. Like
right.
when I put $40 down on a dragon and the seams don't line up, you work that dragon. You keep working it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you get like the one that's like overbalanced so that it falls, you like you Dremel out and you put some lead weights or whatever, you know, and it's just like you don't need to do that. Like I'm still on the fence because I got some green stuff to put a horn on that one a big Nurgle guy that like printed perfectly except for one horn, right? And I was like, okay, but even still, I'm like, that's going to be a little project to sculpt his new horn, and I'm like, when I have time, if I have time, because he was
There
made
is.
with resin.
You said the magic word. Our currency is no longer money because the cost of the materials is cheap. Yes, resin is expensive, but you get a lot of it. You get a lot of minis out of that bottle, even though that bottle is $30, $40 for the premium stuff, or $20 for Christian's discount backstore resin.
$17.99 or
$17.99.
$16.99 if you buy 6 Sunlu. And I will say, my Sunlu prints have been better than my Rich Opto with Tenacious. The Sunlu prints have been great.
Have you been using the ABS like Sunlu?
No, I'm still just using the straight up basic cheapo.
Can you print us an orc and give it a concrete bounce? Like committing that this orc will be a concrete bounce.
It'll still probably. I'm talking about I have the big fancy swords and spiky pokers that all the Nurgle like flesh walkers or whatever they're called have. None of that broke. None of it.
Wow.
I had
maybe I got to give it a try, I guess, because that cheap. They do offer an ABS like this, just a little bit more expensive, like $20 a bottle. And I've been like, ooh, I can get that and see, but I kind of just like I really don't want to go through this heartache because time. like I was going, time is our currency. The time it takes to print these models, the time it takes to paint these models, that is really what is valuable to me right now at this point in the hobby, especially when everything is super cheap. And so, like, if a FDM print, like, and this is more common in the FDM world, they throw out the bads so much more faster, which is odd to me because it takes so much more time to
Yeah.
print them. But just don't hang on to bad prints. Don't hang on to things that just aren't quite right or you don't quite like it. Just the trash can is a perfectly acceptable answer for most of this stuff. And I understand that people are like recycling and don't want to do too much waste. First, that means don't overprint. You don't
Yeah.
need to print your entire army at one go unless you need to use it that night.
It is
You don't
hard to
need
leave that space on the print tray if you don't need it, but you
Mhm.
can. There's
Right.
certainly no reason to jam it pack if you're not going to use it all. But
With 3D printing, we have the option to hide our pile of shame on a hard drive. It doesn't need to exist in our closets. You don't need to have
why
a
not
drawer
both?
filled with unpainted minis. Print what you are about to use and paint. And if it isn't perfect or if it isn't in the way, if it isn't whatever, just get rid of it. Just toss it and get rid of it.
Or donate it to your local LGS.
Whatever is within the license agreement that you have.
If you're not profiting for it, I don't know.
Each licensing agreements are different.
Fair enough.
Some
Fair
companies
enough.
are okay with giveaway for free. Some companies aren't.
Heriberto says he uses a crummy looking brand called Geo. I have never heard of that. It goes on sale and then disappears for 2 months. I'm liking it better than Soraya. Okay. I'll have to check that out.
This is like some weird cryptid resin. Like, is this some backroom stuff?
Alex asked me if I meet my resin dealer in the dead of the night at a leaky bridge to make sure the cops don't see me. I shop insomnia powered, so it's usually about 2 or 3 a.m.
Oh,
that my resin purchases happen.
And then P&D Mike is Para Marie Kondo. This mini does not spark joy. Does not spark joy. Trash.
Also said, dog broke an unpainted army. About 1,000 points worth. I left on the painting table. Oh no!
Oh no! At least it was unpainted.
Just
it's a printed resin. That's
did
just
you read
a
the last sentence there? Just chuck them. Thanks to this episode. I'm glad we have done good. We've done good.
Yeah, your time is your most valuable resource. And like, I know I'm sounding like a self-help guru here, but especially in this hobby, your time really is your most valuable resource because you only have so much time to build stuff. You only have so much time to paint stuff. That's why I will buy pre-painted stuff. That's why I will buy cardboard houses and like and still buy pre-painted minis and will use pre-painted D&D minis when I need to, because I want to prioritize what I get out of the time I have to spend in it. And doing a really cool job on a project and putting the time into, if I imagine if I had painted that 1,000 point army and then I dropped one of them and it shattered and I would have had to like reprint it, I would have been miserable. I would have kept on to this thing that always, this flaw would have been scratching at the back of my brain every time I tried to make sure, or every time I fielded a guy with half a halberd, or
it would be worse if you'd also run out of a paint and the new pigment wasn't quite the same. And it would never match. And even if you did your best, it would always look wrong.
I am very thankful for my graphic design skills that is never a problem for me.
You're gonna always adjust it out.
I can, there's a little paint challenges on TikTok where like they show you a color or something, you have to mix the paint to get that exact color. Like I can just ace that challenge every time.
Nice.
So like, you show me a color, give me pure pigment paints, and I will give you that color. And it's through, unfortunately, it's like, it's just through 20 years of graphic design work that I just know what to add to get what I want.
So I go for strong accent color and then deliberately have a wonky palette otherwise. Like my plague army is tan and green and teal and so like, but they all have like the same sort of rusty dark iron stuff. So they have a unifying element, but now I can add and take away from it willy nilly. And if I run out of a color or
Mhm.
tip over the GW pot for the 8 millionth time.
Oh no! First, like it is so terrible. Everybody's doing it lately, but it's really on GW for designing the worst possible paint pots
Well, your
ever.
hanging wall story was a higher level. That like
Oh my gosh!
I can just imagine, because in my case, it wouldn't have just been like one or two pots. It would have been like there's a kid's book called The Rainbow Goblins, and at the end they drowned the goblins in colors, and it's like this pile of dead goblins and swirly colors, and that's what my floor would have looked like after. Was it all those?
I had to take it off the wall and I put it
Yeah.
into one of my hobby drawers now. Well, thankfully, and these lids became extra important then because I put the little shields on them to put the swatches, because it was hard enough when they're just hanging out in bright light to determine what they are, because all contrast style paints are just some form of not quite brown or black when you look at the actual bottle. So the swatches are now invaluable to me. I could not use these paints without them now, because
I
now I'm just
was
staring down at a field of white with dots of not quite brown or black on them.
I totally didn't even talk about my Ember Wraiths. I painted a whole bunch of Ember Wraiths over the weekend too, like 14 of them. And that's, you mentioned the contrast. The contrast for the orange shade looks so like dirty brown. I was like, oh, is this the right like label? And like, no, it was just orange once you got on the mini, but it looks like dirt.
Speaking of orange, Speed Paint Zealot Yellow
Uh-huh.
has become one of my favorite little speed paints for this project, because on the one page rules Ratman, they often have like a little hunk of cheese hanging from their belt. And so it just gives me the perfect cartoon hunk of cheese color every time I use it. And it's just glorious. And like on one of these bases, they actually have, there, here, this one has a little hunk of cheese on the base just laying down there. So I had to
He
very
dropped his
carefully,
cheese.
somebody dropped some cheese.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's gonna be prone next round. He's gonna get like attacks of opportunity picking up his
You've
cheese.
seen the Rat Titan goddess, right?
She has the restaurant underneath her, right?
Yeah, there's a little cheese restaurant on their base with little rats selling cheese to other rats. Oh, sorry for Hoppy. Like,
No,
standard
it's good.
disclaimer: I'm community manager for One Page Rules. They pay my bills. But oh my gosh, I love that mini so much. I was squeeing with joy, waiting for the day I could tell people about it. And then my rat boys, my painted rat boys, I've got a little close up. It's a little blurry, but my painted rat boys that survived their transplant, but you can see kind of on their feet that like little bits of the MDF base that got sliced off with the
That's
X-Acto
clearly
knife.
crumbs of cheese, is what I'm saying on their feet.
I was so nervous because they're rats. They have that the plantigrade foot, so I was like, and I know from experience that snaps real easy with this brittle resin. So I was like, very careful, very careful.
Yeah, but you got it. They look good.
And Alex talked about Blessed Sisters Army win. My sibling has requested the Blessed Sisters, so
Soon.
they'll be there. I've already printed a firefight team, a fire team for it. For Grimdark Future Firefight, because I don't want to go army scale with Grimdark Future right yet, because I've gone army scale on the fantasy side of things, and that would just be way too many models to have all at once in the place. Eventually I probably will grow it up to army size stuff, but for now, when we're doing their sci-fi stuff, we're playing Grimdark Future Firefight and using, small teams of like 8 to 12 models, except for my custodian team, which is 3 models.
Nice. Wild Meshes last drop, which had the cool like void watcher thing that I thought was super neat. Those I can't believe they're not Tyranids models are really cool, and so I suspect I will be after my plant fantasy army. I think I might have to get some nostalgia. Tyranids were my first full army for 40K, and I think I might have to go back there and paint some up again.
For my grim darkness, I secretly don't want to even do. I want to do the troopers. I want to do the ground pounders. I want to do
your little like I'm wearing a trench coat guys.
I want to get the little trench coat guys with blasters and like a couple of inquisitors to lead them, and that be my little fire team.
You will taste delicious.
They will die. Thankfully when you buy those models that are that cheap, you actually get them in little groups of 3, so you get 3 models for the price of 1 that activate as a single unit.
Nice.
Even in firefight, it's because they're so worthless. They're shooting on 6s, and
Wow.
it's just terrible. So they like the normal troopers shoot on 5s, the like conscripts shoot on 6s, but that's why you have to have like a veteran there to give them +1 to shooting, just so they'll hit anything at all.
Yikes.
It's so much fun. I want to get me a little team of just like flood the field, even though I'm playing like I'm talking about flood the field, but we're still talking like 15 people max.
Right.
My one unit of rats is 20 rats. So just for this one unit that's like 140 points in my 2,000 point army is 20 rats. So it's a completely different scale of thing. Oh, what do we have else to talk about?
Well, I
Anything else
definitely
coming
wanted
up?
to tell our live listeners and anybody who downloads this in the first week or so, check out the Elegoo clearance sale.
Ah, yes, Elga's having a clearance sale. Tell us about it.
Guess who's gonna get a wash and cure station?
You're finally getting one. Okay,
Well, it's 90 something bucks. So
yep, the Elegoo Mercury Plus 2-in-1 Wash and Cure Station V2. Is this Saturn sized?
I there's another one that's like 94 somewhere in there. It was an older one. I think I got.
They've sold a lot of stuff.
I was supposed to say maybe it's already sold out. So, but
the Mercury Plus. Look at that. Is this the? It looks big. I don't know if this is a Saturn Scale or not. If you do, it's great because then you can just put the thing in. Did you order a Saturn Scale one?
I will tell you, it's better than the bucket I've been using.
It's better than the bucket.
Yeah, so I'm
it's showing a Saturn on its compatibility list. So there you go.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. It is Saturn compatible.
So I had a question. Could you use this now, right, or something similar?
I retired this one. I got the next step up, the Mercury X.
Okay. So when you do this, though, you wash and cure. Do you wash and cure on your sprues and do your sprue pull after?
Oh, I wash on sprue, then pull, then cure after the sprue's been removed. Okay. So the support, not sprues, the supports.
Yeah.
So what I do is I take my build plate and I put it into the wash bucket.
That was a weird slip.
I take my build plate off the printer.
Yeah.
Put it into the bucket. It has a little bracket that is optional that will hold the build plate into the alcohol, and it'll clean the part. Then I take it off the build plate and still haven't removed anything from the build plate. And at that point, I will remove the items from the build plate into my hot water rinse.
Okay.
And in the hot water rinse, I will pull off the supports and then give them a minute or so to dry and then put them into the cure after they've been removed from the supports.
Does it submerge the whole build plate?
It submerges the plate and it doesn't submerge the knob.
Okay, but it does get the plate, so it gets
so the top of the build plate will get washed off. All the stuff that's hanging on the top gets washed off.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah. So Saturn Elegoo metal tanks for Saturn. It's only $3 off. That's not much.
Yeah, that one's not that good.
But one of the things that is good on this is the Saturn S for only $300, which is a good price for a good printer. Here's the steel, Mars 2, which is their 2K mono printer, only $100. This is a wonderful entry printer. This is a great starter printer for anybody. So for $100, you can get into this hobby with a great printer.
Yeah. So I just want people to be aware of it. And speaking of which, you had a Kickstarter, I think.
Yeah. So our friend Ian Lovecraft has a So they're not their Kickstarter, but they have done the modeling work for a Kickstarter called Riders of the Plains for a company called The Hobbit Hole. It looks like this is their first Kickstarter, and it is a lot of Lovecraft's really great terrain work with some models. It's very much inspired by the Riders of Rohan from Lord of the Rings. So if you like the Riders of Rohan, they've got a lot of models for said riders as options here. But that's not what's got me excited about
I was
this.
about to say, I think the
The riders are
riders are
nice.
fine, but I think you're
The
right. I
riders are
think you're
fine.
right about the real draw.
The real draw is the buildings and walls are just like super on point for this like pastoral early medieval buildings. This is a great option for villages, or even like it's got you could even do like Viking buildings with this sort of style because they've got that really cool cross beaming going on, thatched roofs, wood siding. So very plain folk type buildings,
Like all
early
those
medieval style,
towers.
dark ages stuff. Like stone work is mixed in there. It's just a really cool aesthetic. And because it's a Lovecraft print, this is also portless, super easy to print on an FDM printer. You will have a fantastic looking set of terrain with no effort and hardly any money, based off of all of the previous sets I've bought from Lovecraft. I've loved every single one of them. This is going to be no exception. And so I
Costing
want to
only
let you know
time
it's out there. Yeah. And they
again.
got a really cool wooden walls and palisades because those are very rare in the hobby right now. Lots of people like to do like castle walls or stone town walls, but this whole like wooden pike walls or wooden fortress walls is not super common. And especially if you are doing any sort of Lord of the Rings themed stuff, or if you're playing the Lord of the Rings battle game, this is obviously a huge one for you. They've got the big great halls as well too, so small buildings, lots of really fun little details, and the fact that all this prints supportless but does not look like it prints
Yeah, it
supportless.
looks really solid for
Yeah,
what you're getting there.
yeah. So I did want to shout that out. Fantastic set that's on Kickstarter right now for the next 9 days. So get in there. Alex Schiller says Palisades. Thank you.
Speaking of which, if you want orcs to fight your riders, there is that
And
pre-sign up for Monoliths next. And again, I'm not sponsored or paid in any way by Monolith Arts, but they have a big orc set coming, and it looks huge. So
Herberto says everything he does works so perfectly for Frostgrave. Absolutely. Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadow Deep. This would be really good for both those games. And the Kickstarter right now, because this is a lot happens a lot of times with Lovecraft stuff, they have an add-on for like I think it's only like $18. Or let me scroll down. Yeah, 18 euros to get the Ruins of Frostguard,
I have
which
that
is
set.
like
It's cool.
an amazing set. To get it for 18 euros, like it's worth pledging in just to get that set as an add-on.
Yeah.
Because it is a massive ruined building set with cool magical towers. So very if you're playing a Skyrim game or a Frostguard game, it is just like the best set of terrain for that. I've printed out so much of that set. And oh, did we have any other shout outs? I know I had one more, I thought. Oh, yeah, Dungeons and Lasers.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Delucer, which is their big minis Kickstarter. That is the preview page, I think.
Now, this is not STL files. This is not 3D
It is
printing
not.
related.
It is not. So the reason I like pointing out these though is we're talking about time and resources. This is going to be stock standard minis, and they do a really good job. The push fits, like they do push fit models that you can literally build without glue, even a lot of the time. And I know this one will probably have some pieces that are definitely going to need some gluing, but they do a lot of really solid work. And if you just need staples, this is going to be great. You've got buy-in, by theme, and you also have, the really discounted big price. But usually they also have terrain, and the terrain is super affordable for what you get. And this will it's the backup kit or backer kit, whatever. It's actually going to be on GameFound. I'll bet like $5, but you usually can get all their tile sets and stuff too. So if you just need a lot of filler for basics, and some pretty kind of cute, quirky things. The Owlbear mini is really neat. But yeah, it's just a good value set to fill out your ranks, as I guess what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. So it's only the all-in pledge is 189 euros for over 400 miniatures. So 50 a mini at that price. Yeah,
You're
if you
kind of
want,
in that
if you want all of them,
almost, yeah.
And these minis, some of them are big chunkers too. So
and
this
yes,
is really,
they have a really big history of over delivering on their stretch goals. So
Yeah.
like the Tarrasque I'm getting in my next pledge that's on its way is stupid huge. I don't even know what I'll do with it. It's so big and it's really cool looking. So,
and these are going to be hard plastic. So very like, and the quality of their castings for their miniatures is like equal to GW and at a price lower than Reaper.
Yeah.
So this is a great buy-in. I know that it's not 3D printed, which is a we like our 3D printed stuff,
but we also like time.
Yes. So if you like what you see here, give it a look. You can go back and buy their terrain sets. You can go back and buy that Tarrasque.
Look at him, he's huge.
Yes, he is huge.
I keep waiting for mine to show up. Should be soon.
That big, he would eat a bottle of. It might be cheaper to buy this Tarrasque than to print him.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
He's that big.
That
forest set. Holy goodness, that tree pack looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, not 3D printed, but Dungeons & Lasers, we've been a fan for a bit, so worth checking out. See if you like it.
I've never been disappointed with any of their deliveries. I'll say that.
Oh, P&D Mike. Speaking of Tarrasques and failed prints, I turned a failed Tarrasque arm into a creepy Zelda Wallmaster-esque severed hand. Upcycling for the win.
Nice.
Hey, I'm glad you did. Got some use out of some of those failed parts. I do tend to want to just reprint, but hey, repurposing a cool thing is super cool. But oh man, failed prints and big minis always make me wince because I was talking about my rats and throwing them away. Like even if they were ogre-sized rats, that's still not much money. But when you are talking about those a foot long minis, like those super big ones. In fact, I want to do an episode sometime soon when I start printing some of these bigger minis off for the armies about printing big minis and stuff. Because it really hurts when you have to throw away a dragon because of
I have cheaper. That whole cast and play royal set, and I don't know if you remember, they heat warped on their bottoms, and so I've got, and I overprinted. I just was like, I can print this whole tray. It's a big Mega X tray, and I am still going to turn those into ruins eventually, and I think they'll work great. But I'm going to have to cut them up and stuff. So,
like I really want to print like the big giant fox and some of the bigger minis, and of course when I finally get back around to my lizard men, I want to print like the T-Rex and the big old stompy gator. But a fail at a model that big hurts.
Yes, it does.
It's still pennies on the dollar, but that's a whole lot of pennies this time. And also hours, like
time.
Those big minis are like 17-hour prints, and because like when you're going like the full build height of your printer, it does take a little while. Yeah, there's one thing that will push me into full size Grimdark Future. Those Titans are really impressive, and I want to print that Gamic Titan real bad.
I was watching Squidmar's Titan build.
That one hurts because he's taking the $2,500 Titan and carving it to pieces.
Yeah.
Why?
It's funny because people were complaining that those are usable minis. Why are you doing that? And I have to say, like, dioramas are cool, and I get that it's art, but oh my goodness.
I mean, at that point in time, I think even the GW fanboys are like, no, 3D print that Titan if it's just going to be terrain.
It's funny.
Because there's no restrictions on 3D printed terrain in tournaments.
There was another big artist guy who offered to pre-buy the diorama so it covered the cost. It was just so people would stop complaining about it.
Aw. We have a question. What tools do you recommend for cutting up large models to upcycle? You're going to want to get a... What is that saw? Like the fine tooth saws at hobby stores, the flat saws,
Like
the jeweler saws.
yeah, that jeweler's tools would be good. Definitely mask or respirator if you're cutting resin particles.
Yes, if you're cutting resin, if you're cutting or sanding resin, where you're putting resin particles in the air, get your respirator. Just a thin mask is not enough for that because listen, resin's safe. Resin is to play with in solid form, and if you treat with respect, printing can be safe if you treat it like with respect, and follow the safety guidelines. But some of the worst things that resin can do to you is when it's aerosolized and you breathe it in and it messes up your lungs, and that's when you start to run into real problems. Do not mess around with resin, whether you bought it in a store or you printed it yourself. Sanding or cutting resin, wear a respirator. These respirators are not expensive. You can get one for $10-15 at your local hardware store, and it will save you your lungs. And but trust me, the hospital bills are going to be much higher than the $10 it spent to put this thing on your face before you started.
Yeah. But yeah, I would recommend jeweler's tools. Really, like.
Yeah. If you go to any hobby store, a Michael's, a Hobbytown USA, just any hobby store, they will have a fine tooth flat saw. Your local game store will probably have it. Army Painter sells it in one of their model kits. It's just a very fine tooth flat saw that you can do to make very clean cuts on resin and metal and plastic to do those sort of like conversions for big thick parts. For smaller parts, you might be able to get away with like an X-Acto blade or your hobby clippers and stuff. But resin doesn't really like hobby clippers because it tends to shatter more than cut. So that's why the fine tooth saws are there. And of course a Dremel. If you're going to do some like real rough surgery, a Dremel tool is a nice thing to have.
And you can get some side cut blades for Dremels that'll work pretty well. Just as long as it's not too thick a piece. I was just going to mention though, like if it's from a drop, sometimes dropped dragon becomes shattered sculpture. Very minimal work.
Yeah, super minimal. Yeah, sanding is good. Regardless of what you're doing in this hobby, if you're working with the 3D printed resin, get yourself some sanding of some option. I am fond of these sanding blocks myself, these big old sanding blocks, because when you're gluing resin, the resin sometimes has such a smooth finish that the resin doesn't have anything the glue doesn't have anything to bite into to glue the parts together. So just a little bit of sanding on those parts before you try to glue it together. So like I just took my little rats and put their feet on here and just rubbed their feet a little bit, and then was easily able to just glue them down to their bases. Super easy. You can also get away with just taking your X-Acto blade and like putting little score marks, like little scratches on the part that's going to be glued. Do it to both sides. That a lot of people that are first getting started with resin printing and having like frustration gluing the parts together, it's because they're not sanding or scoring, and the glue just has nothing to bite onto. Also, less glue is more. You just need to get the surface wet with glue. You don't need gobs of the stuff on there. Hope that helps. If you've got any more questions, feel free to message us.
More glue, more cure.
Yeah.
It takes time, so yuck.
And we are, speaking of time and how precious it is, we are out of time, everybody. So if you wish to, you can visit us at printergames.com, where you'll find all of our back episodes and links to all the cool socials. You can find us at facebook.com/printergames, twitter.com/twitchergames, printergames rather. And you can find us over on YouTube at youtube.com/param. And until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Mastery, and don't forget to use your screen protector.